I never imagined a simple morning errand would shake the ground beneath my feet. That day, sunlight spilled lazily through the curtains as I grabbed Daniel's car keys. He'd rushed out earlier, muttering something about an early meeting. To me, it felt like any other Tuesday, ordinary, uneventful, the kind of day you barely notice. I slipped into his car, the leather still carrying the faint trace of his cologne. But the second I turned the ignition, everything shifted. The dashboard lit up, glowing blue and steady, and then the GPS spoke. Fastest route, home. At first I smiled at the thought of heading back, until I noticed the address. It wasn't ours. Not even close. This so-called home was across town, in a neighborhood I rarely even drove through. My smile faded instantly. My heart ticked faster, sharp and unsettled. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, trying to make sense of it. Maybe Daniel had been at a client's place. Maybe it was just a glitch. But the street name stared back at me like it knew a secret I didn't. I whispered it quietly to myself, repeating it until it stuck in my mind. The GPS dimmed back to silence, but I couldn't. A pit formed in my stomach, heavy and undeniable, telling me this wasn't nothing. This was something. The rest of that drive felt strange, almost like I wasn't the one behind the wheel. My hands moved, my eyes scanned the road, but my mind was locked on that address glowing in my head. I kept asking myself why Daniel's GPS would suggest it. He never mentioned knowing anyone in that part of town. And Daniel wasn't the type to get sloppy with details. At least, that's what I thought. When I pulled into the grocery store, I sat in the parking lot longer than usual, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face looked calm, but inside, I felt that slow churn of suspicion I couldn't quite silence. I replayed the scene in my head, the screen lighting up, the word home, and then that alien address. It felt like a breadcrumb, accidentally dropped, daring me to follow. I tried to shake it off, telling myself not to invent stories where none existed. But the truth? That pit in my stomach only grew heavier. It wasn't just confusion anymore. It was fear, mixed with something sharper. Curiosity. And once curiosity takes hold, it doesn't let go. I told myself I'd let it go, but I already knew I wouldn't. Not this time. That night, I couldn't sleep. Daniel lay beside me, breathing evenly, as if the world hadn't tilted for me earlier that morning. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of his breath, wondering what secrets it hid. Every time I closed my eyes, the GPS screen flashed back into view, that strange address pulsing like a beacon. My chest felt tight, like I was holding on to a question I wasn't ready to ask. I thought about the little details, how he'd been coming home later, how he kept his phone closer, face down on the table. I had brushed it all off, not wanting to seem paranoid, not wanting to doubt him. But now, with that address carved into my memory, it all felt connected. Like puzzle pieces I'd ignored were finally sliding into place. My mind raced, and the more I pieced together, the less I liked the picture forming. By morning, I had made a silent decision. I wasn't going to confront him, not yet. No, I'd keep this to myself, play along, act like nothing was wrong. But inside, I was alert, sharper than before. I needed to know the truth, and I was willing to follow that glowing breadcrumb trail wherever it led. After all, sometimes the answers you're not supposed to find are the ones that change everything. The very next day, Daniel told me he'd be working late. His voice was casual, the same tone he always used, but my ears caught every note. I smiled, nodded, even kissed his cheek as he left. But inside, my heart thudded with a new determination. I finally had the excuse I needed to test that strange address. No more guessing. No more second-guessing myself. Tonight, I would know. I waited until his car disappeared down the street before grabbing my keys. Sliding into the driver's seat, I entered the memorized address into the GPS. The screen lit up, confident, like it had been waiting for me. My palms felt damp against the wheel, but I steadied myself. This wasn't just a drive. This was a step into the unknown, into a truth I wasn't sure I wanted but couldn't ignore. The city lights blurred as I drove, each turn taking me farther from the familiar comfort of my neighborhood. My stomach twisted with every mile, my chest growing tighter with each green light that pushed me forward. And then, finally, the voice of the GPS softened into silence as I rolled up to a modest apartment building. Nothing fancy, just plain brick walls and narrow windows, the kind of place no one would notice. But I noticed. Oh, I noticed. I parked a few spaces away, keeping the engine off but my eyes wide open. The building looked ordinary, almost painfully so, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that it held something extraordinary or devastating. My pulse echoed in my ears, louder than the silence outside. I kept asking myself, what am I about to see? And deep down, I already knew the answer wouldn't be kind. Minutes crawled by like hours, each one stretching the knot in my stomach tighter. I almost convinced myself to leave, to pretend I had never been there. But then headlights swept across the lot, pulling me back to attention. My breath caught as Daniel's car turned in. He wasn't in a suit anymore. He'd changed into something more casual. In his hand, I spotted a bouquet of flowers, bright, fresh, deliberate. I sank lower in my seat, my body trembling but my eyes locked on him. He walked quickly, almost eagerly, to the entrance of the building. My chest burned as I watched him press the buzzer, his posture relaxed, familiar, like this was routine. A moment later, the door clicked open and he slipped inside without hesitation. And in that instant, the truth slammed into me. This wasn't a mistake. This was his other life. I sat frozen, gripping the steering wheel like it could hold me together. The bouquet haunted me. Those flowers weren't for me, hadn't been for me in a long time. My throat tightened, a mix of rage and heartbreak pressing hard against my chest. Watching him vanish into that building felt like watching the life I thought I had dissolve, brick by brick. The truth wasn't hidden anymore. It was standing right in front of me. I wanted to scream, to storm inside, to demand an explanation. But something stronger held me back. Control. I realized I had the upper hand, even if my heart was breaking. He had no idea I was there, no idea I was watching, no idea that the foundation of his lies had just cracked. In that moment, silence was my power, and I wasn't about to waste it. So, I stayed put, eyes glued to the door, mind racing. If this was where he went when he said he was working late, then I needed proof, solid proof. I knew this was only the beginning, and the answers waiting for me inside that building would demand patience. As the minutes passed, one thought looped in my head. If he had a second life, then I needed a second plan. The following days, I became someone I never thought I'd be. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was a quiet investigator, a shadow trailing the man I once trusted. Each time Daniel announced he'd be working late, I didn't argue or question him. I just nodded, as though I believed him, then waited for the perfect moment to follow. Every drive back to that apartment tightened the knot in my chest but sharpened my focus. I watched from a distance, careful, patient, almost surgical in my silence. I took note of the times he arrived, the nights he stayed longer, the gifts tucked under his arm. Once, it was another bouquet of flowers. Another night, it was a small box, jewelry perhaps. Every gesture he made for her was one he had stopped making for me. And each observation etched itself deeper into my memory, forming a ledger of betrayal. One evening, I parked closer, windows cracked just enough to hear the faint sounds spilling out from an open window upstairs. His laughter. Carefree, unguarded, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard in years. It pierced me, cruel and sweet all at once. My heart ached, but my resolve grew stronger. This wasn't just about catching him in the act. It was about reclaiming the power he thought he'd stolen from me. The woman appeared one night, stepping into the glow of the streetlight as Daniel opened the door for her. She was younger, carefree, her laughter bubbling like champagne. She clung to his arm with a comfort that cut me to the bone, as though she had every right to be there. I felt the air leave my lungs, yet I didn't move. Watching them together was like watching strangers in a play, except I knew I was the one cast as the fool. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone, steadying my trembling hands, and snapped photos through the windshield. Each click was like a nail being driven into the coffin of our marriage. He smiled at her the way he used to smile at me, back when our love was new and effortless. That memory stung, but I let it fuel me. I wasn't collecting heartbreak. I was collecting evidence. Night after night, I returned, careful not to be seen. Sometimes I sat for hours, the cold creeping into my bones, but I stayed. I learned his patterns, when he arrived, when he left, what he carried inside. I built a timeline, piece by piece, until the picture became undeniable. This wasn't a fling. This was a life he was building, parallel to mine, a secret home where I was the ghost. The longer I watched, the calmer I became. My anger hadn't vanished. It had transformed, settling into something colder, sharper. Rage can burn out fast, but calculation? That can last forever. I realized this wasn't about catching him red-handed. It was about making him face a truth so undeniable, so public, that he couldn't twist it, couldn't lie his way out. Each night I drove away from that apartment, I wasn't defeated. I was armed. The photos on my phone, the notes I kept tucked away, the details only I knew, they were my ammunition. He had been so careless, so certain he'd never be found out. But I was building a case, brick by brick, and he didn't even see it coming. My silence became my strength. And in that silence, a plan began to take shape. I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't fall apart at his feet. No. When the time came, I'd let him unravel all on his own. He had given me the perfect weapon without even knowing it. The very GPS that betrayed him once could betray him again. And I was going to make sure it did. It struck me one morning, like a spark catching fire. That GPS, the same one that had exposed his lies to me, could expose him to everyone else. Daniel was arrogant, certain his secret world was airtight. But what if his own car betrayed him in front of the very people he wanted to impress? The thought made my pulse quicken. It was poetic, really. His pride would become his downfall. I sat in the driveway, engine off, as I carefully reprogrammed the settings. With just a few clicks, I erased our real home address and replaced it with the mistress's apartment. From now on, whenever the GPS said home, it wouldn't lead him back to me. It would lead him exactly where he didn't want eyes to see. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from satisfaction. All those nights of silence had built to this moment. Every photo, every note, every ounce of pain had forged the perfect trap. He thought he was clever, untouchable. But he forgot that I had been watching, learning, waiting. Now, all I had to do was let the stage set itself. And as luck would have it, he handed me the perfect opportunity on a silver platter. That weekend, Daniel strutted around the house, buzzing with excitement. He had invited a few business partners over for what he called a casual dinner, though nothing Daniel did was ever casual. He bragged about showing them the life he'd built, the family he cherished. I played my part, smiling, nodding, setting the table as though my heart wasn't plotting in every beat. They would see his version of perfection. And then, they'd see the truth. As the evening unfolded, glasses clinked and laughter floated through the dining room. Daniel thrived in the spotlight, boasting about his integrity, his success, his so-called balance of work and family. I watched him from across the table, every word dripping with hypocrisy. If only they knew. But I didn't need to expose him with accusations. No, I just had to wait. The GPS was ready to speak for me. When one of his colleagues finally stood, brushing crumbs from his suit, and asked Daniel for his address, I felt the room shift. "Why don't we just use your car's GPS?" the man suggested. My chest tightened, not with panic, but with anticipation. Daniel laughed, easy and confident, as though nothing could ever trip him up. He handed over his keys, completely unaware he was walking straight into the snare I'd set. The colleague slid into Daniel's car, the others crowding around, curious to see the route. I stood near the doorway, heart steady, eyes fixed on Daniel. The GPS flickered to life, its voice calm, certain. Fastest route, home. A pause. Then the screen displayed the address, not ours, but hers. The mistress's apartment, glowing in bold letters for everyone to see. The air went sharp, brittle, as silence swallowed the room. Daniel's face drained of color, his confidence cracking in an instant. "Oh, there must be some mistake," he stammered, fumbling for words that wouldn't come. But no one bought it. I watched his colleagues exchange glances, their raised brows whispering judgments louder than any accusation. The GPS had done exactly what I'd planned. It had spoken the truth, clear and undeniable, with no chance for him to rewrite it. Whispers rose, followed by polite but hurried excuses. One by one, his guests slipped away, leaving Daniel exposed, humiliated, cornered in the ruins of his own performance. He tried to laugh it off, but the sound fell flat, brittle as glass. I didn't need to say a word. My silence was enough, my steady gaze telling him I'd seen everything, and that this was only the beginning of his unraveling. By the time the last guest left that night, Daniel was a shadow of the man who had strutted around hours earlier. He avoided my eyes, muttering excuses even he didn't believe. But I stayed calm, almost serene, because the truth was, I'd already moved my pieces long before the dinner. While he was busy building his second life, I had been quietly dismantling the one we shared. The power he thought he owned no longer belonged to him. The very next morning, I walked into the bank and withdrew every cent I was entitled to, shifting it into an account only I could touch. I'd filed the divorce papers weeks earlier, waiting for the right moment to serve him. Now, with his reputation cracked open in front of his colleagues, that moment had finally arrived. It wasn't just about leaving him. It was about leaving him stripped of the very things he valued most: his money, his pride, his image. And I didn't stop there. With a steady hand, I gathered the folder I had prepared. Dates, times, photos of him walking into that apartment, his gifts, his laughter captured through thin walls. I sent it all directly to HR at his firm, the same place where he constantly bragged about integrity being their cornerstone. I didn't need to write a single damning word. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. The fallout came faster than I expected. Within days, Daniel's polished world began to collapse. His firm couldn't overlook the evidence, not with their pristine image on the line. Whispers in the office turned into official meetings, and those meetings ended with him being escorted out, box of belongings in hand. I didn't have to be there to see it. The news found its way to me, like smoke curling under a door. My phone buzzed with messages I never bothered to answer. At home, his voice grew sharper, angrier, but beneath it, I heard desperation. He tried bargaining, tried blaming, even tried turning the guilt on me. But I was unshaken. For every word he threw at me, I had silence waiting, stronger than any argument. Silence is power, I'd learned, and mine was louder than his fury. The man who once thought he could manipulate me with charm now stood powerless in his own wreckage. I watched him unravel piece by piece, The confident stride, gone. The smug smile, vanished. Even the way he carried himself seemed smaller, like a balloon deflating in slow motion. He had gambled everything on the lie he thought he controlled, and now he had nothing left. Nothing except a car whose GPS betrayed him more faithfully than I ever could. And to me, that irony was beautiful. I caught one last glimpse of him a week later. He was alone, behind the wheel of that same car. His shoulders hunched, his face pale under the weight of everything he'd lost. The GPS glowed faintly on the dashboard, guiding him once again to the address he never intended anyone to see. His home. I almost laughed at the cruel symmetry of it all. The same device that unmasked him to me had destroyed him in front of everyone else. I didn't wave. I didn't even slow down as I passed by. There was nothing left for me in that man, nothing worth saving from the rubble of our life together. I felt lighter, freer, as though the chains of his deceit had finally fallen away. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was standing in his shadow. I was standing on my own, strong and steady, with no need to look back. That night, I sat in my own living room, quiet, peaceful, mine. No buzzing lies, no gnawing doubts, no double life seeping through the cracks. Just me, and the simple comfort of knowing I had walked away with my dignity intact. Daniel had lost everything, but I had gained something priceless: peace. The kind of peace only comes when you've taken back your power and left betrayal exactly where it belongs, behind you.